The free speech issue is the biggest one for me because the comedians have the most to lose from that, and they're the people who should care about it the most. But I was shocked to find that they don't, by and large. And it reminded me of, when Julian Assange and WikiLeaks were under the pump, the establishment press abandoned them. I mean, so this is going to come for you too one day.
It was in 2000 in Victoria, on September 11, 2000. So this is exactly 1 year before the World Trade Center attack. There was this event in Melbourne, and it was the Global Economic Forum. I went to that protest, and we were protesting the World Economic Forum. It just blows me away to think that that's what the left used to protest about.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the biggest complaints that the left had about the World Economic Forum was Big Pharma getting too close to government. Like... Welcome to The Harm Principle. This is the show where we talk to the dissidents, dreamers and visionaries. Now, today I have a very special guest who happens to be both a comedian and a lawyer, although I'm not sure if he's both at the same time. During COVID, he said some things that upset people, as did I, so we have that in common, I suppose. But he's also in the legal sphere. He's a criminal defence lawyer. And I'm very happy to have him in Melbourne, all the way from Perth in Western Australia. Corey White, thanks for coming along.
Thanks for having me, David. It's wonderful to be back in the once great state of Victoria.
Now, I've heard you've had some bad experiences here in the past, and we'll get to that later. But again, welcome here. First question I'd like to ask you, like being a lawyer and a comedian at the same time, it's sort of interesting combination. I'm not sure if there's many other people that do that, but tell us a bit about how you got into comedy at the first place.
Well, I was very blessed growing up. I had funny parents. And,
right.
Growing up in our house, humour was a way of dealing with adversity. And Eddie Murphy Raw and Delirious, they were VHS tapes in my house.
I've watched those when I was a kid too.
Driving on holidays, listening to Rodney Roode.
Oh, yes. He's still going, isn't he?
Yes. And there's a famous case in Western Australia which Rodney Roode took to the Supreme Court because he was charged under the old Police Act for indecent language or obscene language.
Was pretty indecent and obscene though, wasn't it?
Yes, but he took it to the Supreme Court after he was convicted in the Magistrates Court, and he was successful on appeal, and that decision kind of paved the way for comedians in this country to do what we do. But that's getting away from the question. But I guess I did a 21st speech for one of my very good friends, and someone said to me, you should give stand-up a crack. So I did the Triple J Raw Comedy competition and did well, and it was just, I guess, a hobby I had throughout uni, and it became an addiction at some point.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was how I got into it, mate. It was just sort of by accident that I fell into it. But yeah, it's been a wild ride, but a great set of skills to have for a criminal defence lawyer.
Yeah, well, I suppose you need to have a sense of humour sometimes, don't you?
Yes, reading the room too. I mean, I think that's, and just people skills, being able to deal with people. That's so much of what a lawyer does, particularly as a criminal lawyer.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the people skills and being able to build rapport or disarm people with humour. It's served me very well.
You mentioned before Eddie Murphy. Do you have many other comedians that you see as heroes or people that you really look up to or find entertaining? Yes.
I mean, Bill Hicks was the comedian that struck the deepest chord in me. Alive, I don't think there's too many I draw inspiration from. I mean, I've always admired and loved the work of Dave Chappelle.
Yeah.
I did lose an enormous respect for him, though, when I went to see him when he was in Perth and lining up, they were handing out branded face masks.
Branded face masks?
Branded face masks.
What did it say on them? It
just had the Chappelle logo on it.
Right. Okay.
And then not one joke about the most divisive issue of our lifetime. It upset me a little bit.
Yeah. And what was the most divisive issue?
The vaccine.
Right. Okay.
So, yeah, if you're a social commentator and the biggest social issue of our time, is not discussed in an hour and a half long stand-up set. I think sometimes what is not said is more important than what is said.
That's weird having a mask given out at a comedy event because you can't actually tell if someone's laughing or not when they're wearing a mask.
It wasn't a requirement to wear them at that stage. It was
Right.
almost just like a souvenir you're being given to commemorate your experience here. But I did find it strange.
Yeah. Okay. And I've spoken with another person on this show, Hayley, and she told me about what it's like working within the entertainment industry. She's a musician. Mm-hmm. You should go back and check out that podcast, and certainly go and listen to Hayley Mary's music if you want to listen to some of her songs. But she spoke about how the industry has this sort of self-policing mechanism, and they talk about diversity all the time, but there's very little diversity of thought. And I know that you've experienced what it's like when you sort of step outside of what the general consensus is. I'm interested to know, like, is it the same in the comedy sector as part of the entertainment industry as well?
Yes, on steroids.
Yeah,
on
right.
steroids. The culture of dissent is not tolerated. I don't know if you've read Manufacturing Consent.
I certainly have.
It's the same thing. It's a filtration process to prevent people who aren't a safe pair of hands behind the stumps.
So it's not dictated from above. It's like an organic mechanism.
Yes. And, look, the best thing I ever did in my life was to break ranks and, give the bird to that group think, because it suffocates the thinking and the art. And during that time, people were desperate for answers or a different view, and they were turning to art to find it. And they were let down terribly by the artistic class in this country because they were camel-toeing the party line, as I like to say. Because what you're saying, you're effectively auditioning for jobs in the future. And you can never be on the ABC if you don't have the right opinions. So that's why it's... there's a limited amount of work and money in that space. So that's why people are so vicious with the way they will police opinions. And the Gestapo is very strong in Australian comedy.
Gestapo?
The Gestapo, I call them, yeah.
So you said you broke ranks. Like, what was the point at which you broke? Like, what was the thing?
In 2021, I did a show.
That was a dark time in 2021.
Well, in Western Australia, we didn't really experience what you guys did. We were looking across the Nullarbor going, well, these blokes want a bigger slice of our GST. Fuck them. But there was an issue in Western Australia with Woodside sponsoring the Fringe Festival, and they had a clause in the performance contracts whereby the performers weren't allowed to make fun of the sponsors. I was particularly aggrieved by that because I was following the Bernard Collaery story about Witness K and us, spying on East Timor during the oil and gas negotiations. So I decided I was going to donate the proceeds of that show to the East Timor Hearts Fund, which is a charity up there. And I did very well, was making waves, and there was a joke that I was in trouble for after I'd been, persistently heckled by a girl with a particular colour of hair.
What colour was that?
It was blue.
All right, blue. All right.
And I made it wasn't so much a joke, it was a heckler retort, but there was a journalist from the West Australian in the front row who then had a crack at me, and I didn't know he was a journalist. And I put him down particularly savagely, and the entire room laughed. And when a room full of people laugh at you, it's very humiliating.
I could imagine.
And anyway, this bloke didn't take it very well. His wife laughed. And he followed me out of the room and started threatening me with defamation and calling me all sorts of names. And someone filmed it. And the next day I was having to do Triple M, and they tried to ambush me. And the joke was...
what did he film, sorry?
So someone filmed this journalist having a crack at me after I'd put him down for heckling.
Right.
And anyway, the comment before that, the woman heckled me, I said, look, I've got to go. They said, yeah, good, fuck off. I said, well, look, I'm not everyone's cup of tea, but the reason I've got to go is I'm a criminal lawyer. I'm going home to prepare a bail application, and I might get a rapist out on bail next week. So get home safe. And that was the offensive joke, so to speak. And anyway, I defended myself on Triple M. I won the argument, and the following day, the Bruce Lehrmann story broke. And everyone's saying, well, you know, you can't tell a rape joke. Well, I said, well, how am I supposed to make fun of the Liberal Party if I can't? And because I won the argument, it incensed the cultural Karens and revealed the ideological schizophrenia amongst the lefties and the artists generally. And it was a turning point in my life because the arts community abandoned me, and people who I'd done pro bono work for, you know, during the course of my life, because, Corey's now an enemy, I can throw him under the bus for my own self-advancement. It shaped my mind for what was to come, and it was effectively the pre-season for COVID and the vaccine debate coming there. So that was how I found myself in that position.
Yeah, it's like an interesting point because things that people say, they're always within the context of like current events, right? And you know, it sounds like you got sort of unlucky in that case, like because there was these other contexts at the moment, at that point in time, that caused particular sensitivity about that particular topic. But it's like this happened a lot during, like you mentioned COVID as well. That happened a lot during COVID. Like things that people said during COVID, or things that I said during COVID that were sort of outrageous or taboo during COVID, now are considered common sense or normal, right?
Well,
And
Brett
it's
Sutton's
weird.
just conceded it recently, has he not?
Yeah. It's sort of, the like it was amazing how little reaction there was to that sort of confession, I guess, that a lot of those things that they did during COVID in Victoria didn't really have much scientific weight behind them. And yet at the time, that was what I wasn't necessarily even opposing things. I was sort of saying, can you show us the sort of evidence behind this, and can you show us the justification for limiting human rights on these things? Because, you know, there's obviously some sort of balancing act here and some sort of calculations that you've done, and maybe if you're going to lock people in their houses, you should tell them that. And they never sort of did. They just said, no, we're doing this to save lives, and, you know, you're an outcast if you even ask questions about it. Like, it's sort of
I believe
wild.
they call that the NARM principle.
The NARM principle, not the harm principle. That's
Do
the
as we
NARM
say,
principle.
not as we do, and don't ask to see the advice.
Yes, well, it sort of makes sense now because we realise now that there wasn't anything behind it, or at least very little, as far as we can tell. But you probably, from what you said, you've gotten in a bit of trouble for what you said during COVID as well. Like, what sort of happened there that you said some things that people didn't like?
Well, look, there was friends of mine in the arts, some whom were lawyers, that were fully on board with the state narrative, and the fear component made a lot of people very compliant and turned them into authoritarians. And the authoritarian personalities came out of the woodwork. And I was essentially saying, well, you know, a bit like yourself, we have a right to sort of interrogate some of these things and ask some legitimate questions. And the legitimate questions were dismissed as conspiratorial or tin hat thinking. So I lost a lot of friendships. It did cause me some professional harm, although that's largely been overcome. But I look back on it with great pride. And I've never been more proud of anything in my life than to stand up for the things that I did back then, and I would do it again in a heartbeat. Would I do some things differently? Absolutely. But that's the benefit of hindsight.
Yeah, I suppose I feel the same way. Some things I wish I had have gone harder on, actually, but, you know, that's another thing. But you mentioned, like, that, the professional harm, it's sort of overcoming now. I understand that you're in Melbourne at the moment. You've done some shows here. I'd be interested in your views on, like, what's the comedy scene like in Perth and Melbourne, and what's the sort of difference there, and what have you done in Melbourne?
Yeah, look, Melbourne's not renowned for its warm and friendly nature and camaraderie amongst the comedians. It's very factionalised.
Yeah, right.
There are comedians who won't play certain venues because they tolerate people like me.
Right.
Or, it's very high school, really. I mean, you sit with those people. I don't want to be with you. And Perth, when I first started, there was a great sense of camaraderie about it. And it's one of the things I lament enormously about the arts in this country is that there is no broader sense of purpose and camaraderie. And the free speech issue is the biggest one for me because the comedians have the most to lose from that, and they're the people who should care about it the most. But I was shocked to find that they don't, by and large. And it reminded me of, when Julian Assange and WikiLeaks were under the pump, the establishment press abandoned them. I mean, so this is going to come for you too one day. So, look, my thing about the comedians in this country, their body of knowledge has anorexia. It's run by two agencies, a duopoly essentially of Token and Century. And why I was so angry about what happened to me, I was cut loose over a joke, whereas comedians in this country who've actually done things against women that are reprehensible, well, if you're making enough money, your agency will get them on a non-disclosure agreement and pay them hush money, and it goes away and you continue your career.
Wow. You mentioned the issue of free speech and how comedians should care about it. And I've heard it said often that comedians are like the canary in the coal mine with free speech because they're always pushing the envelope and they're the ones that are going to get pinged first. And do you see much pushback against, there's an issue with censoring things in Australia and the chilling effect of different laws and stuff like that. And even through this, manufactured consent that we see, is there much pushback within the entertainment sector, do you think?
You're looking at it.
Yeah.
And I was the only comedian in this country who said anything about COVID or the vaccine.
Yeah.
Or that was contrary to the official narrative. And I've got a great clip of a gig that I did where the MC had been, shitting on the anti-vaxxers. And I came out and I sucked and I was like, who's had the vaccine? They're like, yeah, woo! I was like, I've just overcome the misinformation and had my first shot. They're like, yeah, good for you. I was like, calm down, it was heroin. And it was the most exciting but terrifying time just because you could play with the group psychology in a room and sucker them in and hit them the other way. And
yeah, right.
But the censorship's got two angles for me. One is the self-censorship, which I think is
the chilling effect,
the most pernicious form of it because people are afraid to even speak amongst their friends. And the second part of it is the digital censorship. And that's the one that we really don't know what we're up against because these algorithms are very secretive. They're held, very close to the chest because it's commercially sensitive, it's politically sensitive. I had dozens of messages of people saying to me, I've been trying to share this video and it says it's unavailable. And I've had multiple clips, just quietly removed from Instagram for things that were true. I mean,
yeah, it's the digital stuff. Yeah, you're right. It's it is pernicious because you don't. Sometimes it's obvious, right? You'll get a strike. They'll say, this is offensive or misinformation or whatever. I actually haven't had any strikes against me on platforms, but maybe I'm not edgy enough. But then sometimes it just sort of gets buried by the algorithm and it gets censored by just not being put in front of people's faces.
Well, it's subtle, right?
It's not technically gone.
You're not being deplatformed. You're being de-amplified.
Yeah.
And your reach is limited. And, that control is so dangerous. And the techno-feudal societies we are about to become, it terrifies me because you can see the way algorithms shape thinking. I mean, I come home from work and it's what has the algorithm fed my girlfriend today? It's just some relationship guru or I'm like, oh no, I need to ban you from Instagram. I want a social media ban for my girlfriend, but that's getting away from the point.
Yeah. I mean, X did something quite unique amongst social media companies, though. They published their algorithm, they told people how it works, and you could see it. And as soon as they published that, a lot of people started analysing it and seeing how it actually worked and what happened with it and stuff. But then other platforms like Meta platforms, they don't publish that, and you sort of have to just figure it out. And there's almost like this, it's almost like a witchcraft sort of horoscope community of people that have all these ideas and theories on how it works, and they do tests and stuff to try and figure out what's going on in the black box. And it is.
And I
pretty
imagine that
mysterious.
it's being tested in different jurisdictions. For
Yeah.
example, okay, well, let's try this new feature out in Canada. Then we'll try it out in the UK. We'll go to Australia
Maybe.
next. And it's a way of pressure testing these things. But look, it's speculation, and that's the problem without having full disclosure. Where the disclosure is insufficient, speculation fills the void, and that's where conspiracies originate. And now, after the COVID era, I mean, I was at an event a few weeks ago, and the Chief Justice of the High Court was talking about the loss of trust in institutions in this country. Any ideas why? No, the institutions themselves don't appreciate how they may have contributed to that decline in trust. And it makes governance and democracy much more difficult if people don't have trust in their institutions. And if someone has wronged you or they lied to you and they don't come to you with an apology that's sincere and contrite, well, you wouldn't trust that person again. It's the same with our institutions. And if someone came out and made a very sincere apology and said, yes, you were censored and this did happen and you weren't conspiracy theorists, I think it would go a long way to restoring some trust. I'm not sure it would get the likes of Desi Freeman back on board, but you know, the government has a huge role to play in that, and they've created this problem of their own making because they sacrificed transparency and truth at the altar of public health.
And that still continues, unfortunately, in other areas which we've dealt with in my office. But you mentioned about vaccines. My problem with, like, before the vaccines were mandatory, there was lots of people saying, oh, you shouldn't get the vaccine because of X, Y, and Z. We got people calling my office. And the response to people then was, oh, well, that's fine. Like, if you don't want to have it, don't have it, right? And they're like, oh, okay, well, fine. And that was fine. And so we didn't really say much about it because it wasn't being forced on people. And then after it became mandatory, we sort of had to say something then, right? And I quite notably got kicked out of Parliament for refusing to hand over because they made it mandatory for politicians as well. And I refused to hand over my paperwork. I thought it was outrageous that politicians could be excluded from Parliament because of their medical status. I thought that was wrong. And so I refused to hand it over and I got kicked out. But actually my biggest concern about the mandatory side of it was that it's done such damage to trust in medicine and
science
and
more
public
broadly.
health and science more broadly, because people feel like these guys could turn on us. Like they did turn on us. Like they turned on us and they forced us into things. Like if they have a view on something, they might use it against us, right, and force us into something. I think it's done enormous damage to science, like what they did by having this mandatory medical procedures on people. And they say, oh, it was a choice, you didn't. But like it's nonsense. Like you couldn't in Victoria, you couldn't get a job, you couldn't go to a restaurant. They had these vaccine passports. Like, in fact, the only places you can get into is lots of the Chinese restaurants. They didn't seem to care about checking it, so it was fine. But like other places, they were checking it. But yeah, I mean, what do you think about like the damage to the trust in science that's happened here?
Oh, I think it's a tragedy. I really do, because science has given us so many wonderful things, like this technology here. I mean, last night I phoned into Kalgoorlie Magistrates Court from backstage at the Comedy Club to do a bail application.
Wow.
Science is fantastic.
Yeah.
People live longer. There's treatments for things. But the damage that I just don't know how you fix it. The genie's out of the bottle now, and I don't know how you put it back in. I don't have any answers for that. I'll have to leave it to the likes of the thinkers of the world like Peter Thiel to solve it.
You're right.
The Antichrist.
Yeah. So we mentioned before you're a lawyer. Like, tell us a bit about like what sort of work you do, and like you're a defence lawyer, right? So
Yeah.
what sort of work do you do?
It's very varied. I mean, when the police are involved, people find themselves, calling a lawyer. Most people who come to see me aren't career criminals by any stretch. They're just everyday people who've met with misfortune. But it's either bad luck or bad judgment. But everything from fraud to drugs, murder, sex offences, unhinged political activists who've done silly things and found themselves charged.
There's been a few of those in Melbourne recently.
Well, I mean, it is the capital for that sort of thing, but it is becoming Melbourne's biggest export at the moment, is political violence. So, the practice is broad and varied, but it's specifically crime. But I love the criminal law because it is the theatre of life, and it's the intersection of the separation of powers. And when you get a brief of evidence and you see the toys that the police have, whether they're state or federal police, it's quite frightening, especially if you're a civil libertarian. The federal police have a new toy called a network activity warrant, a data disruption warrant.
A network activity warrant. What's that mean?
Well, we're monitoring your network's activity.
Yeah.
There's another one called an account takeover warrant, which is where they covertly install the software on your phone and they can take over all of your accounts, from your banking to your social media, without your knowledge. So, look, we are in a brave new world.
Difficult to get those warrants?
Yes, but look, the police have a thing of going to preferred magistrates or justices of the peace to get signed warrants.
So what sort of evidence would, like, to get a account takeover warrant or a network activity warrant, if I was a investigator and wanted to get that warrant, what sort of evidence would I need to provide to a magistrate to get that?
You need some evidence that there's been... You've got to have reasonable grounds for asking for the warrant. So they have...
So they've been doing something
Yes,
bad.
so the police have an intelligence database, and that's not admissible as evidence, but it allows them to get a warrant to obtain admissible evidence. But the biggest ones these days are the phone downloads. Now, there's a company called Celebrite that makes the software to download your mobile phone, iPads, and it's frightening. You can't delete anything from your mobile phone. It's recoverable. And with the new generation of phones, with the eSIM, you don't even need to plug it in to be downloaded. It can be downloaded remotely.
Wow, that's frightening. And you sort of wonder when you hear about these sorts of technologies and the tools that the police use, whether you believe it or not, but they use it legitimately, you sort of wonder, like, there must be organisations out there using it for far more nefarious purposes as well, surely, like state actors or organised crime or God knows.
I mean, they're the toys that the police have. I can't imagine what the intelligence agencies have. And, what do they say? That civilian technology is 10 years behind military technology. I hate to think where military technology is at in that regard then.
That's frightening, really. You mentioned before the word civil libertarian, and I read that a lot. I identify as a libertarian, obviously, and I often hear the word civil libertarian. I'm not really sure of the difference. But you said before some people don't want to go at clubs, go and perform at clubs that platform people like you. What's a person like you exactly? What do you think?
Well, I'm just a knockabout Aussie bloke. Do you know what I mean? Like, I come from working class roots. When I was in my younger phase of stand, I was considered the wokest comic going around. But I was a product of old school left wing philosophy, where power, you see it through the lens of socioeconomics rather than identity. And that was the change in leftist philosophy in my lifetime. And it occurred after the global financial crisis. Instead of talking about how we break up Wall Street and more regulate the banks effectively so we don't let a bunch of Wall Street cokeheads plough the world into a financial crisis, we started talking about identity, and diversity was going to be the way we'd solve this problem. As long as we had a quota of brown people and women and gays on a board, then more just and equitable outcomes would be reached. It was just never going to happen. The fact of the matter is, all the brown people and the gay people and the white people went to the same elite schools, the same elite universities. They attended the same cocktail parties. Nothing changed. They were just there as, I think it was a bulwark against the revolt and to sedate the next generation of lefties and have them playing the wrong game.
It's interesting you mentioned that change around the financial crisis, because I didn't always identify as a libertarian. In fact, I come from the left originally, but many of the things that I used to believe, I still believe, and I don't feel like it was me that changed. Like, I always believed in free speech.
Couldn't agree more.
I always believed in, like I was always interested in things like drug law reform. I was always interested in things like, multinational corporations being too close to the government. And in fact, one of the weirdest things that happened was in 2000 in Victoria, on September 11, 2000. So this is exactly 1 year before the World Trade Center attack. There was this event in Melbourne, and it was the Global Economic Forum. And it was set up by the World Economic Forum. And I went to that protest, and we were protesting the World Economic Forum. And it just blows me away to think that that's what the left used to protest about.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the biggest complaints that the left had about the World Economic Forum was Big Pharma getting too close to government. Like, it's insane. And I was complaining about it at the time as well. This was back in 2000. They were saying Big Pharma is getting too close to government, and they were complaining about it. And then we find ourselves in 2021 where the left is just silent on that. In fact, they're cheering it on. And it's like other people, like, libertarians and conservatives and stuff, that are actually worried about this now. And I don't actually understand how that happened, but maybe your insight into something happened during the GFC that flipped the switch. I don't know. Maybe that's an interesting point.
Going back to what you said about, you came from that, I guess, philosophy, and that you haven't changed. I feel the same way. I didn't change. The left changed. And whether those people, consciously or unconsciously did what they did, I was so incensed that they sided with an oil and gas company over me on a principle which they should have supported.
I thought that they'd be with you on that.
And it was the ideological schizophrenia laid bare.
Yeah.
And, what's the old adage? If you're proved right by events, people will never forgive you. Because they're wrong. And one of the hardest things to do in life is to be able to admit when you're wrong. And I think being able to admit you're wrong is a testament to someone's character. And it aggrieves me that politicians don't do it more often, because I think it's so endearing when someone's got the ability to concede appropriately when they're wrong.
And back to free speech and, people being wrong. Like, part of free speech is so that you can get exposed to things that might actually be wrong, right? And not have the government decide what's right and wrong. What do you see going forward as being the biggest threats to free speech? We've had some sort of very minor wins recently, the government wanted to bring in this misinformation and disinformation thing at a federal level. They seem to have backed away from that, but then they've got these other things that they're doing, sort of forcing away anonymity on social media. I don't know. What do you see as the big threats coming up to free speech in Australia?
Well, the E-Safety Commissioner, I mean, how is it that we have an unelected former CIA operative working as the E-Safety Commissioner on $480,000 a year? I mean, I can remember not too long ago, Section 44 of the Constitution, if you were a dual citizenship holder, you weren't eligible to sit in Parliament.
Well, that's still the case,
Scott Ludlam had to go. I think someone else had to go. But Julie Inman Grant, it's fine. And the other thing that troubles me so much is the younger generation's acceptance of this. I've got nothing to hide. What's the government ever going to do to me? We don't know what's going to happen in the future. But look, I certainly see the biggest threat is the people's lack of care for it. And it's only people like you and I and some journalists who are banging that drum. And quite often people who bang the free speech drum are tarred with the sovereign citizen brush or conspiracy theorist label. And it's just a way of dismissing their dissent without having to consider it on its merits. So I don't have the answers. And anyone who does, I think you should be deeply suspicious of. But yeah, I mean, look, the Trump era, in free speech, you say whatever you want, and then as soon as the Charlie Kirk thing happened, I mean, well, the Conservatives are back on their cancel culture bullshit.
Yeah.
After railing against it for how many years? Your strongly held principles.
Yeah.
And this is the great test of a principle, is how you'll defend it for people you don't like or agree with. Because if you don't defend it for people you don't like, well, then it's not a principle. It's just a cudgel you can use against your enemies.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. Like, if you're not defending the free speech of someone you don't like, you're not really defending it at all. Everyone likes their own free speech, right?
Yeah, and it's the great test of your commitment to the principle. And it's the old Voltaire line, isn't it? You know, I don't agree with you, but I'll die for your right to say it. I wouldn't die for a lefty's right to say some things, but, you know, Voltaire was more committed than I.
I feel like maybe, just maybe, there's a possibility, like, the left used to be the champions of free speech.
Yes.
I mean, like in the 60s and 70s, absolutely they were. But even up to the early 2000s, I feel like they felt very strongly about that and championed it. I feel like there has to be something happen to them that will make them question what's going on and question this creeping authoritarianism that's been happening. Like, surely there's got to be some event or something that will happen to them that will make them think maybe we need to agree, maybe everyone needs to agree on this free speech thing, otherwise things are going to get bad. And I don't know, maybe it's something like Trump getting elected, and maybe they think, oh wow, we need to be able to speak out against that, or speak out against things that he's doing, therefore we need our free speech to do that, which is actually true.
Well, that's why in America it's the First Amendment.
Yeah.
Because without your right to speak, well, how do you express your thinking? But this is the thing about the free speech debates. It's always messy because there are people who have views that, you know, we probably don't want to tolerate.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, Karl Popper's thing. You know, how do you tolerate the intolerant? Because they're not going to play by the same rules as you. So, yeah, I don't know what the event will be to give the lefties the kick up the arse that they need. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if COVID wasn't the wake-up call, what will be? I mean, short of being, you know, the police kicking in your front door and holding you down and giving you an injection, which they have the right to do in Western Australia under the Public Health Act.
Is that right?
Yeah,
right.
You can be forcibly vaccinated.
Yeah, I don't think they even went that far in Victoria. I've never heard of it actually going that far. Did it actually happen?
No, look, it's never been enacted, but there's a lot of laws on the statute books that haven't been used. But given the right political climate, they will be.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like when you see laws, like one of the things that I always try and think about when I see a bill come before Parliament is you got to think, okay, these are the powers that the government's giving this particular department or whatever now, but how might they be used in the future for other things that the current Parliament's not envisaging? And the fascinating thing is, like, the Public Health and Wellbeing Act in Victoria, when you look at some of the things in there, like things about forcibly detaining someone to get medical tests and shutting down businesses, if you look at the origins of these particular laws, they've got nothing to do with what actually happened during COVID. Like there's parts in the Victorian laws about the ability for authorities to, under very extreme circumstances, like someone intentionally spreading disease, to detain someone and forcibly test them. That was because there was someone many years ago who was intentionally infecting people with HIV, right, through sexual contact. They were intentionally doing it, and the government reacted, as they always do, but then it was used for other purposes. The other ones with shutting down, giving the Department of Health the ability to shut down businesses or close down buildings, that was more around salmonella, like food poisoning outbreaks or Legionnaire's disease in air conditioning systems and stuff like that. but then they were used for something totally different that was never envisaged when the laws came into place. And like, it's something really that I think people need to think a lot more about, that when a power comes in, it's going to be there for a very, very long time. It's going to be used for things that you may not have envisaged now, and it's going to be used by people that aren't in power now, by the bad guys that you don't like, whoever they might be.
And this is the thing. The governments come and go. The bureaucracy stays. And when these powers are being delegated to a director general of a government department, well, he's not accountable to the electorate. He's just a pencil pusher bureaucrat. And the minister has oversight, allegedly. But the devil's always in the detail in these things, and people have reliably short memories around the world, and that's how we're governed. People, what's the Milan Kundera quote? The struggle of man against power is one of memory against forgetting. And people don't remember.
What's something positive to come out of the last few years, though? Like, I've felt like people were really depressed and upset about things that have happened and shocked by the overreach of power and all these things. But I also feel like there's an entire cohort of people that have sort of, woken up somehow and said, oh, well, I need to get involved and do things. And I know certainly in our party there's a lot of people like that who were never interested in politics or anything at all before. And then they've all of a sudden just gotten involved. Like, what's some sort of positive outcome that you reckon makes you in some way optimistic?
Well, first one I would say is when the chips are down and when the times are tough, you find out who your real friends are.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And the second thing I would say is that you find your tribe.
Yeah, right, that's cool.
I remember thinking, running into some people of our persuasion in New South Wales, and we're sitting there having a beer and sharing a story, and the camaraderie and the bond was so strong. I mean, it was like being at the RSL as former soldiers from the great COVID war.
Oh man, I know those feels.
But I think the biggest one for me, it was liberating. And maybe I can't remember the name. Invictus. I am the master of my fate and the captain of my soul, and that spirit, and I've carried that with me ever since. And I'm the shortest man in the room, but I walk very tall, and it gave me an enormous self-confidence. And not to be, I know fucking everything, but very self-assured, and I'm very proud of the stance that I took, despite the cost, and some things are worth paying. But I also appreciate that I was in a privileged position because I didn't have people relying on me. I don't have any kids. I didn't have a mortgage to pay. And not everyone had that. And there's a lot of sympathy I have for the people who I call the jabbed and jaded, who, took it because they had no alternative or they couldn't, see it out for 3 months. I had 12 months in me to be able to, be ostracised. And yeah, I think that was another silver lining of it. It's like knowing that, your judgment is sound and you're not a nut job. And yeah, that's one of the silver linings that I found has come out of it.
Wow. That's a really great insight. So look, thank you so much for speaking with me today. If people want to follow you and see what you're up to, where's the best place to do that?
You can find me on Substack, The Jolly Gag Man, or you can find my Instagram. It's NateFlog, NateFlogg. Don't ask me why I chose that as a name handle, but Corey White was taken, so
yeah,
I just improvised. But so that's where you can find me. Other than that, most weeks in the Perth Magistrates Court, you'll see me there.
All right.
But I hope not to.
Well, if you want to if you want to see Corey, you can even go to the Perth Magistrates Court if you want to go there. I'm not sure. Do many people go there for entertainment?
Oh, yeah. Look, it's great theatre going to watch a criminal trial. There's a whole cohort of retirees whose hobby is to just go and watch criminal trials.
Well, there you go. I didn't know that. So please follow Corey on social media, and thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time on The Harm Principle.